Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to echo the voice of my constituents of Markham Unionville on the disgraceful proposed Liberal budget. I will also be splitting my time with my colleague from Calgary, Rocky Ridge, Madam Speaker. The Liberal government has dedicated a lot of space to buzzwords, investments, and spendings, but they have yet to provide Canadians with a clear plan for job creation, tax reduction, and economic stability. Madam Speaker, my constituents are hardworking Canadians with strong values that include fiscal responsibility and the safety of our communities and respect for their hard-earned dollars. These are all things this Liberal government has their budget have overlooked and omitted. The Minister of Finance recently stood in this House and talked about what the government's budget will give to Canadians. However, Madam Speaker, it is now clear that this budget promises far more than it can deliver. More importantly, it deprives hardworking families of benefit from credits and provide relief for Canadians. Madam Speaker, if I could draw your attention to the topics of taxes, a subject I am sure that many of us concerned with. This Liberal budget is ending the children's tax credit, the children's art tax, and tax credit for post-secondary education and textbooks. These are the benefits that most Canadian families take advantage of sooner or later. Under this government, these valuable tax credits will no longer be available to provide relief. Conservatives have reduced taxes over 150 times, bringing the tax burden for families to its lowest point in the last 50 years. In contrast, Madam Speaker, the Liberal budget is not just directly taking money out of people's pocket, but due to their fiscal mismanagement, the proposed budget also impacts businesses negatively. Over nearly decades in power, an average family of four was saving almost $7,000 per year under the previous Conservative government. Contrary to what the Liberal government will try to tell Canadians, lower and middle-income families have benefited the most from these savings. This is not political hot air. It is coming straight from the parliamentary budget officer who independently investigate the government spending. Madam Speaker, last week, the PBO came out with a report which showed that Liberals were hiding information from Canadians, creating their own economic growth projections and exaggerating job growth expectation. Despite saying the budget 2016 will help Canadians, this government is ending the hiring credit for small businesses and completely abandoning our manufacturing sector. The Liberals have not committed to funding the Automotive Innovation Fund, the Auto Suppliers Innovation Program, or the Advanced Manufacturing Fund, among other programs that businesses have benefited from. Madam Speaker, according to the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, the decision to not reduce the small business corporation tax to 9% as promised will cost small businesses almost $1 billion per year as of 2019. Canadians will recall the reduction to 9% was tabled by former Conservative government in an effort to aid small businesses, which are the backbone and economic engine of this country. Where have the Liberals' promise, hope, and hard work gone, Madam Speaker? The Liberal budget dedicates a lot of space to innovation and investing in innovation. But, Madam Speaker, this budget lacks a clear plan to encourage businesses to invest and create jobs in Canada. According to Fraser Institute, under these conditions, businesses and entrepreneurs will either remain on the sideline or decide to invest in other countries. Simply put, without predictable business environment, Canadian businesses and workers will be left with a sad view of the future. Additionally, Madam Speaker, according to The Economist, the Liberals are spending at the rate of 7% more than they can afford. The previous Conservative government left Canadians with a budgetary surplus, and already the Liberal government has placed us all into a dark pit of endless deficits. Let us not overlook the burden that will be left on the shoulders and pockets of our children and grandchildren. So please, let us not play political games with the Canadian economy. Madam Speaker, as the Canadian Taxpayers Federation rightfully stated, this Prime Minister's first budget is an absolute disaster for future generations and for Canada.
That's for sure.
Madam Speaker, my constituents of Markham Unionville, alongside with Oakville and Vancouver, are some of the highest tax people in the country. And this budget is an embarrassment for them and for hardworking Canadians across this country. But what is the most embarrassing, Madam Speaker, is the complete disregard this government has when it comes to the safety of our communities. The world is not getting any safer. As the past few years or even the recent weeks have shown us, mindless violence happens when we least expect it. Whether in the heart of European Union in Brussels, Belgium, or at a military recruitment center in Toronto. Despite these recent tragedies, the Liberal government has allocated less than $60 million for our country's public safety. This government lacks credibility when addressing our national security, and these cuts go to prove how dangerously uninformed this Prime Minister and his advisors are by putting the safety and security of Canadians at risk. Madam Speaker, the Liberals are highlighting buzzwords and investments at a time when they should be restraining or reallocating its funds to serious issues like national security and public safety, which affects Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Before my colleagues from across the aisle start pointing fingers and accusing my caucus colleagues and I of being against investment in infrastructure, I want to clarify that this is not the truth. Conservatives support infrastructure spending that improve our quality of life and ensure that our goods to both domestic and international markets. Under the previous Conservative government, more money was invested in infrastructure than any other government in history. We were second amongst the G7 countries in 2014 in regards to infrastructure spending. In fact, Madam Speaker, under the Conservative government, over 1 million net new jobs were created, the most per capita in G7. These were high-quality jobs, with 80% of them full-time, and which 80% of them were created in a private sector. Madam Speaker, investing in infrastructure should create jobs, and those are investments that I support. But this is not the case with this government and their lackluster budget, because Canadian businesses which may be able to contribute to local infrastructure projects will not benefit from this plan since the Liberals have decided to raise taxes on them. Worst of all, this government will force provinces to introduce a carbon tax that could cost families over $1,000 every year, and it will impact the ability of businesses to hire hardworking, deserving Canadians. Madam Speaker, I cannot support a budget full of money-grabbing measures meant to make all Canadians pay more and now and for years to come. As such, I stand united with my caucus colleagues against this government and their senseless budget promises. Madam Speaker, I would like to thank my constituents once more for enabling me to stand in this House today to voice their concern and the measures introduced 2 weeks ago. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Newmarket, Aurora.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Markham Unionville for his contribution to this debate. The member and I share Our ridings are in the same region, York Region, and it's interesting to note that recently the Mayor of Markham and the Chair of York Region both said that the infrastructure spending in the last 6 to 8 years was woefully inadequate. So how can he stand there today as the member for Markham and Unionville and not encourage the infrastructure spending in his municipality and not try to pretend that what was done in the past was sufficient? Because it wasn't. He knows it. Anyone that tries to get around our region knows that there needs to be more money spent on transportation, more money on key infrastructure items that just weren't done in the last 6 to 8 years. How does he answer to his constituents when they say we need more infrastructure spending and we need it now?
The honourable member for Markham Unionville.
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable member for the question. Madam Speaker, this is the fact. All he have to go back and look at the record. The highest dollars were spent in 2014 by the Conservative government in the G7. So the numbers were, we spent the most money in the last budget, as well as, in fact, if I can raise something up here, the money what they're trying to spend, we don't have the money. We don't have the money. They're spending the kids' futures money, our future kids and the kids' kids. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member for Halliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I want to congratulate my friend from Markham Unionville for his very inspiring words. The last question focused on infrastructure, and we talk about infrastructure spending. During the campaign, the Liberals said they would focus extra spending on infrastructure. There is money for infrastructure, and we thank them for that. The problem is that's not where the majority of their spending is. It's all on program funding, which means permanent and locked in. That's the problem. We could go all and buy the biggest house and the best car, and if we're living beyond our means, at some point the bill comes in and we're responsible for it.
That's right. That's exactly it.
We're not in a recession. Our economy is showing signs of growth. So basically we're spending for the sake of spending. So what happens, Madam Speaker, when we do hit a recession? We have to dig deeper. That's the problem. And my friend here from Markham Unionville is from business. He's got a business background. I was wondering, how would you deal with this in the business world? Because you can't spend for the sake of spending and expect to come out ahead. We've seen this in Ontario.
Just a reminder that the members have to ask the question to the chair and not to the individual member. So the honourable member for Markham Unionville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, the honourable member, for the question. In business, I've been in business most of my life, and if there is no money, you have to budget the budgets. You have to make sure you have a fiscal responsible. You want to make sure you have the money, or you can afford to pay the money back. In this case, $30 billion as in the election time they was promised $10 billion deficit. Now it's gone to $30 billion deficit, and our future generations and for future generations are going to be on the hook. And this is why this is a bad budget, and we will not support it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? We have time for a brief question. The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre, North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And, you know, I find it truly amazing in the sense that the member, if I was listening to him, you would think he was commenting on a conservative budget of a year or two ago. The member needs to realize that the infrastructure dollars that the former Conservative government talked about never actually spent money. It was just a promise that sometime in the future we'll invest in Canada's infrastructure. This budget makes a commitment to spend today into infrastructure. It makes a commitment to children from every region of our country where we're going to see substantial increases through the Canada Child Tax benefits. It invests in seniors. It invests seriously in infrastructure. Why would the member oppose a budget in which I would think would benefit so many of his constituents?
The honourable member for Markham Unionville, a brief answer, please.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the Parliament Secretary. What I see is the number that are just reworked around. Madam Speaker, the children's tax credit, the children's art tax credit, and the tax credit for the post-secondary education and textbooks. Those were the serious tax credits. They're all gone, Madam Speaker. Thank you so much.